Good afternoon, and we're live again in our program, Strictly Healthy. Very pleased to have you join me again today. And we've had some exciting guests, some really fantastic guests with great information. And today is no exception. We're going to be talking today about the type of bread that we probably all should be having. And the topic today is what's so bad about bread? And we have our special guest today, Patricia Barrowman, who will be telling us a bit more information about that and explaining various aspects. So I want to welcome you now, Patricia.
Thank you very much. Very pleased to be on today. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. I'm always pleased to have you on. So, Patricia, first of all, I'm sure there's people there that don't know who you are. We have, a few people that you do know, but just tell us a bit about your background, who you are, what your lifestyle's like, where you've come from, etc., etc. Can you just share some details like that with me?
Sure can. Well, I am Patricia. I am the health revolution activist. You maybe tell by my accent, I'm not British. I am from America originally. I've been in Somerset in UK since 1997. But more recently, I've been exploring sort of why we get ill, and we're sort of seeing that manifested now with the situation we're in. But
Yes.
really, there are just toxins that affect our body because our bodies are designed to heal themselves. So what interferes with that? Well, we're going to look at one today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I suppose there's several, but as you say, we're going to look at one. So what is so bad about bread? Let's start there. Can you give us some idea about what's so bad about bread? What's in the ingredients? What are the toxins, etc.?
Yes, this is a subject that's been very close to my heart for a long, long time. But let's look at the differences in bread. Now, my grandmother used to eat bread, no problems, and probably your grandparents as well. So what has changed? What has changed? Well, we haven't changed. So let's look at the bread. So if we go back in history to sort of Roman Egyptian times, where the Roman and Egyptian armies lived on bread. They didn't stay in any one place long enough to grow fruit and veg. But they were empowered to live on bread. So how was that bread different back then? Well, it didn't have pesticides sprayed on the wheat, for one thing.
Yes.
And then they stone ground the wheat. And you can still find stone ground wheat.
What was the benefit of being stone ground? Can you share that?
Well, they had to break down the wheat to make it chewable and digestible and to be able to cook with it. So they had to grind it down into a powder to make a flour, then to make the bread.
Mm-hmm.
The difference today is we have a lot of roller milled flour. So we'll go into a little more detail on that in a minute. But so they stone ground the flour, and of course it was whole grain. They didn't have the fancy contraptions to separate off all the layers, and there was no white flour then. But then, of course, they didn't have yeast. Yeast is sort of mid-19th century. So they had to ferment it. So back then, bread was flour, water, and salt. Flour, water, and salt. And if you want to look at that slide, we can sort of break down what a wheat bread looks like. It's many, many components. So when it's stone ground, it's stone is rough. So it's ripped and shredded apart. So the small wheat particles are very rough. And of course they're full of all these lovely nutrients, vitamins A, vitamin E, natural omegas and minerals and vitamins. So your body takes a good couple of hours to extract all those nutrients out of it, which is why you feel satisfied and full when you're eating proper whole grain bread, sourdough bread.
And
Now,
it's the grain. I mean, we always thought it was such a humble thing, but when we look at this, the breakdown of this is fantastic, isn't it?
well, yes, who would ever realize today that bread is so nutritious? Now, if you look down at the bottom of this graph here, this chart, you'll see the germ. Now, that germ, that is sort of like somebody called it the baby wheat. It's like an embryo. That contains natural vitamin E. Natural vitamin E. Now, that is the bread industry realized they can sell that off to pharmaceutical companies and cosmetic companies and get far more money for it than they can turning it into bread. Also, that vitamin E oil gives the bread a shorter shelf life. So they sell that off. And so basically what we're left with is largely white flour with no nutrients, and it's roller milled, so it's flattened and obliterated, so our body digests it in half an hour. So now you're hungry and you're going to eat something else. You eat long fermented sourdough bread, you are satisfied, and you're going to eat far less, and you're going to be more powered up to do things.
Let me just jump in here a minute. So yes, you say about the bread industry. So how are they sort of calling it sourdough bread if they're just using sort of white bread with all the nutrients sort of taken out of it? How can they sort of justify, if you like, if I may ask you that question?
Well, there's sourdough and there's sourdough. Now, proper fermented sourdough bread, like the Roman Egyptian, well, most of human existence ate before the industrial age. Again, you take flour and water and you leave it out. You leave it out for 24 hours, 48 hours, and you'll see bubbles starting to form. And that are the bacteria, the naturally occurring bacteria are fermenting. And most food is preserved. Back before they had fridges, they had to preserve it with fermentation. So this fermentation process is quite extraordinary.
So you're saying ferment it for 3-4 days. Sorry, carry on.
Well, you want to ferment it so that you get the natural yeast, the natural occurring yeast, the natural leaven. And then when you mix that with flour, water, and salt to make the dough, and you leave it to ferment for 3 days. Now, this is where the magic happens. And this is what's being missed out right now. It modifies the gluten. So someone who's celiac, gluten intolerant, or has Crohn's disease like I used to have, it modifies the gluten so they can eat this bread without a problem. Diabetics can eat this bread because it modifies the starch and turns it into a simple sugar. They don't get that insulin spike.
Right.
Loads of health benefits.
So I just want to jump in here a second. So are the shops and the the markets not doing their sourdough bread like this, as in fermenting it for 3-4 days?
You have to ask. You have to ask. Now, in a shop, I would say no. They generally produce a loaf of bread in 2 hours. There's no time for it to rise. So they use a commercial yeast, which is not a sourdough. And
they use also, I understand, other ingredients as well to sort of make it process quicker.
Well, they can add vinegar and call it sourdough.
Vinegar, yeah.
They can add dough enhancers and things to make it taste tart. Once you're accustomed to sourdough bread, you can tell from the texture right away. If you go to a farmer's market and you see sourdough bread, ask them how long do they ferment it. You really want at least 36 hours to get a good proper loaf of sourdough bread. But some of the ingredients, just to compare, just an ordinary commercial loaf of bread that you find that nice little rectangle in a plastic wrap, that will have flour and water, but they will list the flour as a wheat flour. And then it will say that they've added, just looking at one very popular one, calcium, iron, niacin, and thiamine. Now, the first red flag that goes up for me is calcium. What kind of calcium is that? There's several different types. One popular calcium from a few years ago was made from coral. So people got all up in arms because it was destroying the coral reef, which is true. But the bigger problem with it was that the molecule size of that calcium from coral was so large, it was causing heart problems as it passed through the heart. Here, you don't know what sort of calcium that is, and why, if the wheat has all these lovely nutritions in it, vitamins, minerals, and such, why would they have to add that in? Because they're taking all of the natural ones out, and now they're putting synthetic ones in, which our bodies do not assimilate. They've added rapeseed oil. Well, why would they do that? And there's no mention of being organic. And I happen to know rapeseed gets loads of glyphosate. They also added soya flour. Now, soya, again, they did not mention that it was GMO because most soya is GMO. And Western diets do not assimilate soya properly. It's a known endocrine disruptor. And then they put preservatives. There were like 3 E numbers with emulsifiers and a flour treatment. And they don't even say what the flour treatment is. And then vitamin C and flavoring. Well, nothing tastes better. Can I show one of my loaves? Can I show?
Sure, absolutely, yes. Why not? Go for it.
They put all those ingredients in is to standardize the end product so that every loaf of bread looks the same. As we go shopping, we squeeze, oh, that's a nice soft one. Oh, that's a nice soft one.
Yes.
And they all look the same. Well, look at this. I baked these this morning, especially for you, Linda.
Oh, wow. Yeah, bring it up closer. You're making me hungry now.
They are not the same.
Yeah.
I put nettle leaves on this one. I'm getting sort of known for my nettle leaves, and look at that one. You know.
Oh, yeah, beautiful. So really,
that look the same.
The bread we're talking about is your bread, obviously, homemade, etc. But the other bread we're mentioning, that's sort of mass produced, large supermarket type of bread, and they sort of have to do this because they have big turnover. They have to churn it out quickly. So that's why
it's all profit margin. But you could make a loaf of this bread, highly nutritious, organic, whole grain, sourdough. Anyone can eat it. You could make that for about £1.
Amazing.
And I'd like to clarify that, the 3 or 4 day fermentation, that is not laborious. You mix it up, you put it in the fridge, you leave it for 3 days, you take it out, you shape it, goes back in the fridge overnight, then you take it out and make it. It is not difficult. Not difficult. And here's I'm hoping you can see the lovely in the texture.
Solid.
That's nice and soft.
Yeah. It's so tasty as well, this type of bread. It's amazing. So remind me, what are the actual ingredients that actually goes into this type of bread?
Flour, water, and salt.
That's it.
Flour, water, and salt.
And it's the fermentation. It's the sourdough starter, really. Can you tell us how that sort of happens?
Flour and water.
And you leave it for what, a day or so?
Well, it's a little bit of a process, and we don't have a whole lot of time here, but you mix up the flour and water equal parts. You leave it in a bowl on your kitchen counter, and you watch for bubbles the next day. And then you'll want to take some of that out and feed it to keep it going because it gets hungry. Those are live bacteria.
And to feed it, what is that again? Can you explain?
You feed it with flour and water.
Okay.
And naturally occurring bacteria in the flour that come to life and are feeding on that bacteria that they're creating. And interestingly, our bodies are 9 times more bacteria cells than human cells. And most of those bacteria are in our gut. That's why this bread, our body just doesn't have to think twice about it. It's a good prebiotic to feed the bacteria. It's phenomenal. It's such a good food. And it delights me to see so many friends and clients now getting back to eating bread, spending less on their food bill because they're satisfied and energized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They don't have to eat as much because the bread kind of fills them up.
in a good way, in a good way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they, laboratory rats were fed white bread, and they all died. They all died. Malnutrition. They died of malnutrition.
Because there's nothing in it, really.
There's nothing in it. And there's so much in this bread. There's so much in this bread that's so good for us. And then I mentioned with the starter that once you get it going, you take some out and you feed that. And now you have what's called a discard. You
right.
throw it away. Traditionally, you would give it to a friend to then go on and make sourdough.
Right, yes, yeah. So what can we do then with this starter?
I'm so glad you asked. I made something else for you today, Linda.
Oh, great.
If I can,
we'll have to post it over, I guess.
Share this with you.
Oh, wow. So what have we got here then?
Crumpets.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
A sourdough crumpet. And these are little sourdough oaty biscuits.
Right. Yes. Excellent. Yeah.
And then I have another favorite. If I can share these with you. These are, look at that, crackers.
Oh, wow.
Crackers. Can you see that?
Yeah. Really nice.
Nettle leaves, seeds. That is sourdough starter, little olive oil, and then just sprinkle it with whatever you like. They are gorgeous. So eat all you want.
So the benefits again of using this type of bread.
Well, if you're gluten intolerant or celiac or have Crohn's disease, you're missing out on a whole food group by not eating bread. The problem isn't the bread. The problem is the glyphosate that's sprayed on the weeds. It's sprayed as a weed killer initially. Then it's also sprayed a second time as a desiccant to dry the crops out so they can conveniently get into production faster. But that glyphosate penetrates the crop. It destroys the minerals, the amino acids, the vitamins, and it also destroys the shikimate pathway, which is the cellular communication in the plant, the crop, it's alive. We have a shikimate pathway in our gut bacteria. So there's the problem.
So what type of flour then should we be using?
That's a great question. It absolutely should be organic. And it should be whole grain, not wholemeal, not whole wheat. You don't know what you're getting. That could be what they're sweeping up off the floor. You want whole grain.
Can you explain more about what whole grain is?
Well, whole grain is just like that diagram you had that shows all the components of the wheat head. There we go. Now look at those. Look at all those beautiful layers. Each layer has its own contributing property. Maybe it's the fiber. Maybe it's the minerals. And the fermentation process magnifies the amino acids, enhances the amino acids even more. So you're getting all those nutrients there. And the flour that I use is actually local. It wasn't grown locally. I don't want to confuse that. But it is sprouted. It is sprouted organic whole grain, and then it is dried, and then it's stone ground.
So what's the benefit of it being sprouted? Sorry, and can you explain that a little bit more? I don't know if you were able to do that or not, but
well, it's just that little more life in it, a little more nutrients in it.
Okay.
A little more. And but if you can't get sprouted, it must be organic, otherwise you're consuming glyphosate. And it must be whole grain. So you can find it. I'm sure you can find it if you look for it. Or contact me and I can give you some places to order it and have it sent to you if you're in the UK. And if you're in the US, I know I've seen it in the US. There are many different manufacturers there, and a lot of flour is grown in Canada. So in the US, you can find it, I'm sure. But there's plenty. And we can take back our health.
Yes, that's really what we want to do, especially in this sort of situation we find ourselves. These are some of the things that we can do to help ourselves, and one of them is eating more organic foods, and this type of bread is certainly more helpful. Um, and oh, before we go on any further, the flour is available, as Patricia mentioned. It can be, you can search for this online. We have a good source of it, don't we? Somebody that teaches how to make sourdough bread. So get in touch with myself, drop a message in the chat, etc. Myself or Patricia, you're welcome to contact one of us. Is there contact details for you, Patricia, that you want to share?
Well, can they, on your Facebook or your YouTube, can they message you directly that way?
Yes, yeah, I'm sure people will. I'll check in a minute any questions and comments people might have. But yeah,
my email is staytuned4health@icloud.com. That's stay tuned 4 health@icloud.com.
Okay, I do have a question here, Patricia, from Catherine. She says, "Can you use bread flour?" I'm not sure. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about the flour that we can use, but bread flour, is that any different?
Well, that is a bread flour. It is a bread flour. It is organic, and it is whole grain, and it is a strong bread flour. You don't want to use plain flour at all.
No plain flour. Okay, that's good. Now, you mentioned about healthy things that we can do for ourselves. How is it that you're saying so healthy yourself, Patricia? I hope you don't mind me sort of outing you about your age or age group, but you're looking quite amazing for your age. Any other little secrets that you have that you want to share?
Well, I will be 70 in March, which is bit daunting, but I don't feel it. So that's the important thing. I was quite poorly as a child. Appalling American diets and IBS and Crohn's and all that stuff. So I've always been on a journey to feel better. Now we know that we can heal our DNA. And so through cellular activation, I have overcome many, many obstacles with my health and now enjoy the best health of my life. And my body responds really well now to taking these positive steps.
And what sort of thing have you done? Because I think you said to me in the past that you've managed to, well, not get rid of, but help yourself do away with Crohn's and other IBS type problems that you had.
Well, that was through the cellular activation, which, perhaps I could come back another time and we could talk about that at length, because it's emerging science. It's emerging in the field of nutrigenomics, which is nutrition for your genes. Mm-hmm. I mentioned at the beginning that our bodies are designed to heal themselves. So what gets in the way of that? Well, one of those is glyphosate gets in the way of our body being able to heal itself. Mm-hmm. So once we know what those interferences are, then we can avoid them.
Yes.
And to avoid glyphosate is with organic food. Apples get no fewer than 15 different pesticides. So if you eat apples, by all means, find organic ones and then check and see if they've been waxed.
What's the problem with wax on it? I know, I'm sure there is, but perhaps you might know the answer to that. I don't know.
Well, wax isn't nutritious. I would think eating wax would sort of gum up the works a little bit. They put it on it as a protection. And again, this is because of us.
And to preserve it as well.
Well, we like our apples nice and shiny, don't we?
Yes.
Just like we like our bread soft. So if we demand something, the manufacturers change so they can keep selling it. But if we don't care if our apples are not shiny and that they're healthier,
with imperfections on them.
Yeah.
So the message I think that you're saying here is eat organic as much as we can. stay away from things that that have a long shelf life, because obviously they have a lot of preservatives and whatnot in it. Eat as healthily as possible.
Stay away from processed food. The problem is not the bread. The problem is not the fat. The problem is not the salt. The problem is not the sugar. It's the way it's processed. So we've already looked at bread and why, the different types of what contributes to bread being bad. So now you know what is good about bread. Fat. Do not go on a fat-free, low-fat diet. We need fat. Our brain requires fat. But let's look at the differentiation, and that could be another talk. But organic coconut oil, organic olive oil, you're set. I drink olive oil. It's gorgeous. And I put coconut oil on my porridge in the morning. Our brain needs fat.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, salt, pink Himalayan sea salt, loaded with minerals. But the white salt, I use that to kill my weeds. Terrible. And sugar, our body needs sugar. Our mitochondria produce our energy in our cells. That energy is called ATP. Now, ATP needs sugar. It needs there's a 5-carbon sugar called ribose sugar. Our body needs that. That doesn't mean the white sugar on everything.
Mm-hmm.
The little raw honey.
Excellent. Well, by sounds of it, we'll definitely have to get you back on to expand on some of these various aspects. Now, the time is nearly up, but I'm just checking to see if there's any other questions. Not at this moment in time, but you're more than welcome to leave any questions after this live, because the video is going to be available for replay. So please leave any questions, and Patricia or myself, we will DM you with anything that you've heard from today or heard about today, but and you have questions on it. Please feel free to leave your questions or comments, and we'd be more than pleased to answer them, because Patricia has said quite a few things today, I think, that might be new to you and might be of interest. So we welcome you to contact us with any further questions. But I want to thank Patricia for joining us today. Thank you very much. And hopefully we will see you again. We'll have you back on again at some point. So
we'll have wish everyone a very healthy, happy new year. And we'd be pleased to help you contribute to that.
Thank you ever so much, Patricia.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. So that was Patricia Bowerman sharing some wonderful thoughts about what is so bad about bread. And we know that we now know that there is actually a bread that we can actually use. So we thank you for joining us today on Strictly Healthy. And next week, I think we might be doing a bit of a review or some surprises, who knows. But we will please be in touch at some point again, and come back at 4:00 on Thursday. And we'd be pleased to share some more thoughts about how you can maintain your physical, mental, emotional, and financial health. And in January, we will be starting again at mainly live, and we have some amazing guests lined up for you. So thank you for joining us today, and we shall speak to you soon.